Hello YouTube, this is Dial1000, and today we're trying something slightly different. A simple standoff, AMD versus Nvidia. Both cards are about $230. I picked them up at $230, both brand new. That is Australian dollars. The benchmarks will be Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Haven Bench, and Steam VR test, performance test. Uh, the CPU will be an AMD FX 8350 clocked at 4.3 GHz. The RAM is 16 gig of DDR3 due to AMD not currently supporting DDR4. So, nonetheless, let's get started. Okay, round one, Haven. So, in the Haven benchmark, it actually turns out to be quite a lot different. I wanted to make a couple of notes here. According to the actual Haven benchmark, it was actually detecting the secondary GPU that was not actually active. I do not have Crossfire turned on for these tests, so it wasn't active at all. I did have a hardware monitor up during the test, but I was not recording it, of course, and it was at 0% utilization the whole entire time. According to the actual CPU clock, according to it, it's 3.5, so I think that's erroring out as well, and it did it in both tests, and it was restarted between them, so I'm not sure. It also only states X4, so I'm not sure what the hell that means. I think it's only meaning 4 cores are being used, but it should have been 8, but I'm not sure. Nonetheless, the score between the AMD and the Nvidia card, as you guys can see on each one, Nvidia 760, 2 gig frame buffer, AMD Radeon R9 380s, 4 gig frame buffer. And these cards do actually have a 4 gig frame buffer. I did actually check that just in case, oh no, they only have a 2 gig, and it was recognizing both cards and adding in the frame buffer, but no, it wasn't. So yeah, minimum FPS on the AMD card was 18.9, and on the Nvidia was 17.5, which is not that big of a difference. It's only 1 FPS, barely 1 FPS. And the max FPS was actually quite a fair amount of difference if you called 6 frames different. Some people might. And these were both done on the extreme settings at 1900 by 1600 by 900, as you guys can see, with 8 times AA at the bottom there with DirectX 11. Score, of course, 1243 and 1060. So overall, pretty even there. I would definitely say the AMD card came out on top on that test. Okay, so this is the Tomb Raider benchmarks. So this is using the benchmarking utility. Left is AMD, right is Nvidia, and overall, once again, AMD came out on top, and the card is newer, so I will admit the Nvidia card, being older, is doing a pretty solid job. So 84 minimum, 91 minimum, and this is what done on high settings, not ultra settings, because I don't want to push either card to the point where it would be pointless, where the frame buffer mattered heaps, where the memory clock speed mattered a lot, because the Nvidia card has a much higher memory clock speed in comparison to the AMD card. So max FPS only less than, well, 12 FPS difference between the two, and average FPS there's 6 difference. I'm not really doing the math on these, I'm just kind of on the fly saying about them. I did notice on the AMD one, whilst I was watching it, it was choppy at some points, and the Nvidia one was definitely slightly smoother. But the choppiness was only for one very small section of it. So, okay, Rise of the Tomb Raider, an Nvidia optimized game more so than AMD. Okay, so pretty obvious here. These were both done on the high settings once again. Mountain Peak 60.69 FPS at a minimum of 14.26 on the AMD side and 50.95 FPS average on the Nvidia side. So about 10 FPS difference between the two of them, which is a little bit less, but nonetheless. Syria, once again, about 10 FPS difference. Geothermal Valley, both of them only about 4 FPS difference. The AMD card at a much lower minimum than the Nvidia card. The Nvidia card actually came out with a higher max for FPS than the AMD card did. AMD card only having 70 and the Nvidia card having 88. At Mountain Peak, and the AMD card came out with 120 FPS, whereas the Mountain Peak on the Nvidia side only came out with 88. I will admit, the Nvidia scores are quite sporadic, especially when it comes to these tests, 50, 41, 39, and it's almost a 30 FPS difference. Actually the same on the AMD side as well, except Syria and Geothermal Valley sitting about 4 FPS difference. And saying that, that's actually only 3 FPS difference on the Nvidia side, so overall this would actually be a tie unless we're going by overall FPS, and if we were, the AMD card would win, hands down, at 51 FPS, and Nvidia card at 44. Now on to the last test, which is Steam VR. Okay, so a bit of a mix-up here. Well, not a mix-up, but an added part to it. This is just something that I decided to test slightly. So I've done a AMD test before, that's why it's not showing details. It sits at medium solid, so it doesn't up and down like either of these two. Apologies that I forgot to click show details when I did this test, but I've just decided to run with just these test results and that's it. So yeah, average quality on the actual 770, which mind you was done a while back on the same processor, everything the same, of course, as you can tell. The only thing that was changed out is the GPU. The 760 is defined as not ready, and I have done VR on the 760. It is not good to do it. Don't try it. It is rubbish. Don't do it. With the 770, it was able to reach medium to high settings and dipping down into the lows area throughout its test, and I don't remember too much about its test. I remember it freezing twice throughout the test, and yet it's still no frame CPU bound. I know with the R9 380 series, with the 2 graphics cards, this is only showing the 1 graphics card, but I did it with the 2 in Crossfire configuration. It actually got a complete ready result, so not going to be showing that though, because this is all single GPU, not multi-GPU. Maybe one day I'll do multi-GPU in the 700 or the 800 or the 900 series, that's right, because there was no 800 series. But overall, Nvidia versus AMD, who do I think win? I actually think this is pretty much a draw. I am personally an AMD fan, and if we were putting this here over to Arma 3 or something like that, AMD would actually win, especially if I was going Crossfire. In comparison to Steam, although if I had to Nvidia GPUs, I'm quite sure I could get the exact same, if not almost the exact same FPS, but I find with 2 R9 380s, I actually beat out a 1070 in Arma 3 and ultra settings, especially running in dual mode. I only paid $450. A 1070 in Australia is along the lines of $700 to $800, so it is a lot more expensive. So overall, in that kind of high-end scale, this actually turns out to be quite a lot more cost efficient, especially if your game supports Crossfire, and actually scales positively instead of negatively, like the Division or something like that. But nonetheless, thank you guys for watching, and as always, have a very nice day.